Hi guys, welcome back to another video. So I don't know what's the timing of this video is going to be just because of scheduling wise, but it's still gonna be a Monday, therefore we're working in my sketchbook today. So I have some sketches already laid out and I'm gonna apologize in advance for probably how insufferable I'm going to be even more for the next maybe 2 weeks depending when this video comes out, just because if you're not into like VTuber culture, I guess, the things I'm gonna say is probably not gonna make sense, but my Kamioshi from Nijisanji En is graduating very soon, which makes me very sad. So in more simple terms, my most favorite, I think people know what a VTuber is at this point, but I guess like streamer from Nijisanji En is going to be graduating. So I'm a little bit in a weird state of restlessness in terms of having regret. But let me talk about what I'm drawing and who I'm drawing before we get onto that, because I might go in a weird rambly mode again. So I am drawing Pomu Rain Puff from Nijisanji En, and she's from the first wave from Nijisanji En, and she's part of Lazu Light. So I wanted to do kind of a gouache spread of her. So I already did the sketch prior with the Uni Dia Colour, which for some reason doesn't dissolve with water as easily as the Pilot Color Eno brand, so I'm not going to be doing a cleaner sketch to kind of make sure my sketch doesn't disappear. So I went ahead and already pulled out my watercolors, and I'm testing out a new brush right now, so you might see this brush in future videos, hopefully when I return back to using watercolors. But I'm using watercolors to kind of plan a little bit of the areas of color that I want, and just kind of priming the paper as well, just because sometimes this notebook paper, because it's so smooth, or the oils from my hands kind of get all over the paper, it might kind of prevent the paint from kind of like adhering to the paper properly. And even though watercolor and gouache are very similar in ways, I definitely find it a little bit easier for me to mix the colors that I want with watercolor, but I'm still treating it quite loosely because I don't want to spend too much time painting in areas that I know I'm going to be covering up with the gouache. So right now I have kind of the main Pomu on the left, I have another one on the lower right, and I have 3 Chibis at the top. I'm also going to be using gouache today, like I mentioned earlier, so you saw what my paints look like and what my palette looks like. I should really clean out my palette soon, just because I feel like a lot of my colors were getting a little bit muddy, so yeah, I'll clean it out eventually. I am doing the gouache portion, especially for this particular Pomu, a little bit differently. I usually like to apply very opaque and try to keep everything nice and clean and kind of more pristine when I'm doing stuff with gouache. But for this one, I decided to do a little bit of thinner layers and slowly layer up all my colors. And I actually liked using this method a little bit more, but it did frustrate me a little bit later on the second Pomu that I started to paint. So yeah, I feel like this one turned out pretty okay and I like it the most. I feel like I just still don't have the patience to work with gouache as like meticulously like I did before when I would do the entire spread and hopefully treat them all to the same finish. But you'll see my energy start to dwindle after I finish this particular Pomu. But let me talk about the feeling of regret, like I mentioned at the beginning of this video. I feel like for the most part, if you like something or are kind of attached to something, you usually show it like a lot of love and, you know, attention and care probably. But for me, I don't know if it's because I have too many things that I'm focused on that I don't act on things right away, which is causing me to have a little bit of regret. So I mentioned earlier that Pomu Rain Puff is going to be graduating later this month, I believe on the 20th, which leaves me about less than 2 weeks to actually get a few projects that I wanted to kind of do for fellow Pomudachis, which are like fans of Pomu and Pomu herself. So the regret's kind of coming from the fact that every time I do have an idea or an urge to draw, let's say like a particular character or of like a gift for a person, or projects that are a little bit more like, they don't need to be like timely or anything, but I keep putting them off, being like, oh, I can do it later, or like, oh, it's not like super urgent right now. But now that it feels like there's a deadline or a timeline, or this feeling of doom at the very end of this tunnel, it makes me feel like, oh, I wish I acted upon wanting to draw on those urges, because now that I know that she's leaving, it makes me a little bit more sad, the fact that I didn't end up drawing as much as I would liked. So I don't know. I'm in this weird state. I feel like I'm being very dramatic about this. So I do apologize if this doesn't make any sense, nor does it apply to a lot of people. But that's like something I was thinking about when I was reflecting on 2023 in terms of like art. So even though usually, like, I feel like 80 to 90% of the time that I record anything for a video, it is purely based on my own interest. And, you know, I usually don't do a lot of like requests, or I don't follow whatever's the technically trendy thing at the moment. I just draw whatever I want to draw, whatever's on my mind, or like, you know, just things that I enjoy, just because like if I enjoy it, most likely I'm gonna put majority of my effort into it, and at the very end I don't like regret drawing it or anything. But in terms of like last year, I have so many whips, I have so many work in progresses that it makes me wonder why I keep stopping. I don't know if it's because I have too many ideas, or if it's because I just needed to get it out of my system at a certain point. I'm not too sure. I definitely want to have less work in progresses this year if I can. So like if I plan to finish an illustration, I want to see it till the very end. So I'm going to revisit a lot of my probably previous sketches if I can, but I'm also going to allow myself to just freely sketch without having the need to finish a drawing per se, as long as that's kind of like my intention, if that makes sense. So like sketch because I want to sketch, but finish the illustration if I know I can finish the illustration, rather than just being like, I can finish it like later and then it's going to be 2 months and I haven't touched it since. So I think I mentioned this in previous videos anyways. I'm gonna do kind of I don't know how long it's gonna be, but another keep me company video, and I can catch up on the drawings, so maybe you guys can use that video as a way to catch up with whatever you need to work on, and we can kind of use it as a kind of like almost like a study group, or like a group session of, you know, I need to finish my stuff, you finish your stuff kind of environment. And I will be recording that pretty soon because I want to get 3 whips right out the gate to be finished, especially for this year. And I want to finish it. Actually, I know I can't hold myself to that because I'm in this weird state of mind that all I want to draw is just finish my projects for like Pomu before graduation. That's like before the 20th, and I know I'm going to be hella slow, so I will try my best to get those whips done before the end of January, so maybe it's not going to be as soon as I think. Okay, enough about the rambling. Let's talk about the gouache a little bit. So I'm already doing kind of like the line art phase, which I am keeping it kind of rough at this point because I was getting a little frustrated about not getting the correct consistency to let the paint flow from the tip of my brush to the paper super smoothly. Another thing is that as I was layering up a lot of the colors kind of with more like sheer layers when I was kind of painting her hair and her clothing, I definitely think I prefer this method. One, it doesn't pressure me to feel like everything needs to be super pristine and sharp. So I think that's why I was okay with the line art being a little bit choppy and a little bit, you know, the weight of the lines aren't consistent or anything like that. So hopefully for like the rest of this year where I do end up painting in the sketchbook with gouache, I'm gonna play around with the idea of layering it up slowly again instead of doing things very opaque and sharp and pristine. I'm gonna allow myself to have that a little bit of wiggle room, but also the ability to kind of like adjust and change colors as I need by kind of doing like sheer layers or glazing a little bit. So hopefully I learned something from today's painting session. If anything, I know that after I finish this one, the next one's going to be very frustrating, and it goes through an ugly phase for quite a long time. So it kind of makes me glad that I'm putting a lot of these into time lapses, because you guys don't have to suffer through it entirely. And I guess I missed a chunk of it, but as I was painting the first pomu, I did do very brief washes of gouache on this one and the little free pomus at the very top, just because I did mix up a certain skin tone and then I had excess, so I wanted to use it right away. But I ended up having troubles later for this one because I was having a hard time with her skin tone and her hair color, because I kept making her hair color a little bit too dull and bright, not bright, dull and lighter, and I kept making her skin tone compete with it too much. So I needed to really bring out a little bit more of that golden color from her hair again. But then as I was painting, I don't know if I was trying to do the sheer layers again with kind of like a green or in a turquoise and a little bit of a muted blue into her hair. It was just becoming very like splotchy, and it was kind of like not laying down the way that I wanted it to. And I think it's because I had already done very opaque, very thick layers of paint, where the paint no longer wanted to kind of like accept very thin sheer layers. It became very thin and kind of very see-through to the point where it was patchy, rather than it being a little bit more, I don't know, of the paper texture, if that makes sense. Because if I layered it with kind of more of the paper texture, it layers on very easily rather than layering onto more of a like slick surface, which makes it a little bit hard for me to get like a nice even sheer layer of paint. So I don't know, it's just stuff that I need to learn as I paint more probably in the future, which is something I would like to do for sure. I'm definitely not like a person who's super into making New Year's resolutions. I do like making small goals or just like overarching themes for the year if I can. But this year, one thing is just like sketchbook habit, if anything. And I think I had an okay sketchbook habit near the end of this year in terms of drawing in my sketchbook a little bit more, because I gave myself a little bit of a break from doing digital, because I was in that weird kind of like rut where I was only sketching and not finishing things other than for videos, which allowed me to have more time to draw traditionally in my sketchbook. So it's kind of like a little bit of a trade-off here and there, but I wanted to have a little bit more of a balance if I can. So I'm gonna try my best to do that, if anything. And I think overall, I just want more balance in my life. Like even with like, I guess like my eating habits, or between working on videos versus working on art for myself, even my sleeping habits, or even hanging out with my friends. I feel like I'm very much a homebody, so I did end up doing kind of like a sleepover hangout with my friends at the very end of the year of 2023, which made me realize how much I miss just hanging out with them like in person for just like 24 hours, which was kind of nice. We talked a lot, so yeah, it was just nice being around them again. So hopefully I can see them a little bit more often, even though one of them is moving across the country for a few months, and then hopefully she'll be back again. But I do want to spend more time with a lot of the people I care about, if anything, especially this year. I don't know. I don't know if it's because I'm in a weird sentimental mood. Maybe it's like the feelings lingering from the holidays, maybe. Okay, so let's talk about the little chibis at the very top of the little spread of pomu. So initially, I did do a little bit of gouache, kind of like washes on top of all three of them, with a little bit of the skin tone and a little bit of the hair color, I believe. But like I said, I gradually got more and more tired of painting, so I went ahead and swapped over to using colored pencils, or pencil crayons is how I'm going to refer to them, because I thought it'd be easier for me to kind of like render out each individual little chibi, but I was having a little bit of a hard time. So even though this one was my favorite, I kind of botched up the sketch quite a bit. So the sketch was cute, but the application of using the colored pencils and stuff, I really botched her face up, so this one's no longer my favorite. But I definitely think that the colored pencils do lend a quite cute kind of like texture and mixed media look to it, just because I do have some areas that are a little bit more flat, which is a little bit harder to see in the video, but it's kind of a nice contrast between the gouache painting plus the colored pencil, which I think looks kind of neat. And I'm doing similar application throughout the rest of these little chibis. I think this one turned out to be my favorite just because it's very round and contained, if anything. But where was I going? My brain's like all over the place right now. Once again, it's like 2:30 in the morning and I'm just like, my emotions are like, I'm feeling sentimental, I'm feeling regret. So I'm like anywhere between those right now. But yes, I wanted to talk about the videos for this week. I might make them Pomu-ish related depending on if I can get stuff finished. So if I can balance it out properly, I won't make everything Pomu related or Niji Sanji or VTuber related, just because I know some people are just not into that and not into like the fandom at all, or not into that side of YouTube or streamers or whatever. And I'm not here to isolate you for the next 2 weeks. So I'll try my best to kind of space it out, but don't be surprised if I keep drawing her for a little bit longer, or me kind of showing a lot of my whips and stuff both on Threads and Instagram, just because that's kind of where my brain's at. I definitely want to draw her as much as I can before she leaves. So yeah. Also, I am the type that gets like into fan culture. I don't know if that's like the right phrasing of it, but once I'm in a fandom, I'm kind of like all in, if anything. So, you know, hardcore Carrot, I was a hardcore In Spirit as well, which is like an Infinite fan, and a lot of other K-pop fandoms. But like same with like Genshin, I went all in. So I do apologize that it might be very isolating to some people. I know some people just come for the art, but whenever I get into these very rambly moments where I talk about maybe my interests that might be a little bit more niche, I do feel like, you know, some people might be like, oh, like, I don't know what she's talking about. I don't know why she keeps talking about it. So therefore you might lose interest. So I do apologize in advance. Just bear with me for the next 2-ish weeks, if anything. But it'll probably be very apparent in the thumbnail or the titling. So yeah, probably nothing too much to worry about. And yeah, I think that's it for the end of this video, pretty much. Or at least this sketching session. Or drawing session, painting session, whatever you want to call it. But I think that's it for today's video. Oh, also, I forgot I showed my Pomudachi plush and the little Niji puppet. So yeah, I'll talk to you guys next time in the next video though. And thank you very much for watching. Bye!